Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather. Hope you all are having a great weekend so far. Beautiful here in the southeastern United States, but it certainly is warm. That is going to change next week. Much colder weather is already advancing into the Rockies and Plains, and that is going to spread east late this weekend into New England and then southward early next week. And it is definitely going to be quite a shift for those of us that have had such mild weather recently. Now, I am going to start off with the tropics, and we've got several areas to watch still. Even though we're heading towards the last month of the tropical season here, of hurricane season, we're certainly not done yet. It's been a super active kind of second half of the season, more so than I even thought it was going to be. But the good news right now is that we don't have any urgent threats like we saw last week with Otis. The bad news is that things can still change pretty quickly. So I'm going to talk about the tropics first, then we'll come back to the changes coming over the next few days and what to expect. Several areas to watch. Tropical Storm Tammy regenerated. That is starting to move away from Bermuda, and I don't think it's going to be a threat to land at this point. But the models are showing it try to hook back to the left. So we still need to keep an eye on it just for the time being. Not going to be a threat to the U.S., but keep an eye on things in Bermuda. We've been watching this area that is taking its time developing, started to show more signs a few days ago, then kind of got some wind shear with it, but still looks like it's going to be potentially an issue for the Gulf of Tehuantepec here in southeastern Mexico, as well as Guatemala and El Salvador and maybe Honduras. But there's also a chance that could approach the coast and find a way to escape back to the south and west with this front dropping south. The next name on the list would be Pilar. We've got two areas that I'm designating a low chance of developing, and the one that's actually popped up today has, I think, a better chance of forming than the one that we've been tracking for a couple of days that's going to form in the Southwest Caribbean. This is producing very heavy rain in Puerto Rico, and there is a chance this one could actually get the next name on the list, at least Tropical Depression 22, but the next name on the list would be Vince. And behind these two systems, the pattern kind of repeats itself a little bit here in about 8 to 10 days. So we may have additional weather to keep an eye on here in the Western Caribbean. So after what's been a pretty quiet start to the Caribbean season, we are seeing things picking up here. It was busy in June, then July was quiet, August was fairly quiet. September, things started picking up with Philippe. Then we got Tammy here this month. And in the Western Caribbean, we could still have a couple of storms to track. You see Tropical Storm Tammy is getting some wind shear over some cooler water, but still a decent amount of wind with it. I'm going to learn to talk, I promise. But it is pulling away from Bermuda. So a flip in what we saw last week in the forecast models, which were trying to take it off to the west. It detached itself from a front. It's going to move into some warmer water, but hit some wind shear and probably become post-tropical again. But as it moves down into this area, this could be another zombie storm that tries to reform again. So we're going to have to keep an eye on this well into next week. We do have 92E in the Eastern Pacific, 80% chance of becoming a depression or storm in the next 48 hours, 90% chance through next week. And then we've got an area to watch in the Southwestern Caribbean, which will likely become at least an invest area that models will start getting run on. And that is going to generally track northward towards Jamaica, Cuba, and Haiti in a few days and could become a depression or a low-end tropical storm at that point. I don't think it'll become a hurricane. But an area that I have been kind of keeping a closer eye on is a new area of investigation. It is coined 96L. Models will start running on it here. And that is actually moving northwest away from Puerto Rico, but producing some extremely heavy rain in parts of Puerto Rico. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how much rain we can potentially see. So here's a satellite view from Zoom Earth, and you can see possible development area here, 80 to 90% chance. This area here, the National Hurricane Center, I believe, will designate as a possible system to watch here in the next couple of days on its 2 o'clock update. And then we have Tropical Storm Tammy with 50-mile-per-hour winds. And we don't have an invest yet, but we have an area that could form here north of Colombia, northeast of Panama here in the next couple of days. Here's a look at the satellite imagery. You can see Tammy is losing its convection, and the area of greatest concern as far as heavy rain is this area north of Puerto Rico, producing very heavy rain over the Eastern Caribbean. It's part of a trough here, but beginning to detach itself and will likely become a low-pressure system at the surface. And how quickly that happens could determine whether or not that this becomes our next named system. You can see that trough extends across the intertropical convergence zone, very heavy rain impacting portions of the Leeward Islands. Some of you guys are getting more rain out of this than you did last week with Hurricane Tammy at this time, based on where the track of that storm went. We see just more of a buildup of activity here, more convection. For now, things in the Southwest Caribbean don't look like they're going to take off, but we'll have to keep an eye on things as things will be favorable. And then in the Pacific, 2 areas to watch. This one has my eye. I think it'll become our next depression, and then Tropical Storm Pilar, probably by Monday morning or Monday around lunchtime, southwest of Guatemala. There's another area to keep an eye on here that could maybe try to develop into something, but it's not going to be any kind of threat to land. So here's a closer look at the Caribbean. You can see low pressure beginning to form north of Puerto Rico, the heaviest rain to the east of it. We are going to have to watch this area. It could try to spin up a storm here in the next couple of days, but very heavy rain extends south and eastward across much of the Lesser Antilles, all the way down to the ABC Islands. Just a very wet weekend for a lot of you folks, and flooding could be a potential issue here. Here's the other area that we're watching in the Caribbean. I've been watching this one a little bit longer. It doesn't look like it's going to form as quickly as this one here, but you'll see that rain moving northward into Hispaniola. Eventually, that rain's going to move into Jamaica and Cuba as well as we get to early next week, and then into the Bahamas probably by Tuesday. And then off the central American coast on the Pacific side, we do have things looking a little bit better for development here than, say, a day ago, but there's a lot of uncertainty on the future of where that system goes. And back across the central Atlantic, you see this huge trough. There's an area of thunderstorms that extends from north of Puerto Rico all the way down through the Leeward Islands and the Northern Windward Islands and Barbados, and then all the way down to about 25, 30 east. There's wind shear here. There's a bit of an upper level feature driving these thunderstorms, but there's not an area of great concern at this point for development. So that's some good news here. Here's a look at Tropical Storm Tammy. And the first thing you can see is that the center is actually kind of exposed here. It's lacking deep thunderstorm convection. Here's the front that it was attached to, hanging out over Bermuda, where everybody wants to vacation, apparently, this tropical season. I do love Bermuda, but fortunately for Bermuda, this is moving away from you. I don't think it comes all the way back. This is going to be primarily a shipping concern for those of you that do have interests involving shipping or transportation over the open waters. But some good news here. And then on the infrared, you can see the thunderstorm activity has sheared itself away from the center. So Tammy may actually weaken a little bit quicker. But then you see there's going to be a point where Tammy does curl back to the west. The waters are warmer down in here. I think it's going to take time, but I think it's something we still are going to have to be watching here even later in this upcoming week. But still not really an immediate threat to Bermuda. And you can see, generally speaking, the system will be weakening down below tropical storm strength, probably by Monday afternoon, if not sooner. Here you can look at the European ensembles, and these are the areas that we're keeping an eye on. And you can see 5 of them here from the European ensemble. And the one that I'm kind of concerned about, but not as concerned about because it's starting to show lesser chance of development, but one that would impact more of a population, if you include Jamaica, Cuba, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, is not going to town just yet. It's actually the one northwest of Puerto Rico that I think has a better chance of developing here into a depression. And this is going to track near and just to the east of the Bahamas here as we get to early next week, and then turn off to the north and east. And after Tuesday and Wednesday, I think it's just a remnant low. The system behind it has a small chance of developing as well towards Jamaica or southern Cuba, but the chances have actually dwindled some. And then we have Tammy that's heading out this direction. We're also going to be watching this system here. I think it's Pilar. By the time we get into Tuesday, the track of it is now looking less likely to come up and hit Mexico directly like Otis did, like Max did, but instead something that may graze the coastline here of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, and even Nicaragua, and then actually maybe get turned back out to sea. And if it sits around a little bit longer, I don't think it's going to survive as long as some of the other storms have. There's warmer water here, but there's also going to be a little bit more wind shear at that point. Notice one thing here, though. In the wake of this potential system near Jamaica that's moving northeast and falling apart, we see an increase in some more potential with a future system towards the end of this upcoming week and next weekend. And that favors more towards Central America, less towards the greater Antilles. So we're going to need to watch things here around Nicaragua, Honduras, even Costa Rica, and all the way up to Belize and the Yucatan. For those of you who may be taking any cruises down here, this is something we're going to have to keep an eye on. I don't think it's going to develop very quickly, but again, I've seen things develop pretty quickly where the area of ocean water temperatures is above average, and that will certainly be the case again here. So this could be a potential problem as we get towards next weekend and around the week of the 6th and 7th here. Here's a look at the European ensembles. We can track multiple systems, nothing extremely intense at this point. Here's Tammy weakening. Here is Invest 96L heading to the northeast of the Bahamas. Here's the next area that could form, looking pretty weak at this point, south of Jamaica. And then here's what I think could be the next depression, and then Pilar, and that is heading towards Central America briefly. You can see this area here is not aimed at Florida, but it is aimed maybe towards the northwestern Bahamas as we get into Tuesday. But then you can see it's going to eventually turn away and weaken as it maybe tries to link up with a front near Bermuda. This other area that comes up through eastern Cuba is also weakening, so I don't think it's going to be a long-lived system. We still, though, potentially have Pilar here. And then after Pilar pulls away and this front drops all the way down into the Northwest Caribbean, we've got to keep an eye on the tail end of the front for more development towards the end of this next week and into the following weekend. We may see something quickly popping up here as we get to about the 5th and 6th of November. So stay tuned on that. I don't know yet what's going to happen, but I am going to show you why I think it is of concern. This is a look at the amount of bulk shear, and you can see the red colors indicate stronger than seasonal wind shear. These are areas where tropical development is very unlikely, as there's going to be hostile wind shear, but we see an area of somewhat more favorable wind shear south and east of the Bahamas, and also around eastern Cuba, Hispaniola, and the southeastern parts of the Bahamas. And this is the area where 96L is going, into an area of lower than average wind shear. So it does definitely have some things going for it here until it gets up here into Monday night, Tuesday morning. This front drops down and the wind shear climbs quickly. So it's not going to be something that becomes a named storm and holds together by the time it gets to Bermuda. Instead, Bermuda may get the remnants. But then take a look here as we get later into next week, and you can see wind shear is going to be more favorable, lower across all of the Caribbean except the far southwest Caribbean. And with this easterly flow, we definitely have to keep an eye on this area close to Central America. We also do want to keep an eye on the eastern Caribbean by the 10th and 11th. We see much lower than average wind shear across a good chunk of the Caribbean, which we have not seen for the most part this season. So kind of what you would not expect in El Nino, but something that we do need to keep an eye on. In the Pacific, here's an area that could become a depression. Here's the area we're watching and see how things are well offshore for the time being. We hope that that stays that way, but there are some models showing this trying to come back towards the coast and at least threaten it. So we may have some watches in effect here early next week on the Central American Pacific coastline. Here's a look at our next system, 96L, and you can see the low-level center is exposed, but thunderstorm activity is increasing, and it's also with this southerly flow over Puerto Rico producing some significant rains over these higher elevations of Puerto Rico as you have that upslope coming. Winds coming out of the south, that's tropical, deep tropical moisture gliding up and over the mountains, creating some very heavy rain. So Puerto Rico, we do have to watch out for some flooding, and we see significant amounts of rain and thunderstorms here over portions of the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, especially, as well as the northern Leeward Islands. And take a look here as well at the infrared, so you can see where these deeper thunderstorms are. And things are definitely starting to come alive here to the east of this center. There's more convection with this than there is with Tammy right now. We also see significant amounts of rain here over Antigua and Barbuda, which just got hit last weekend. And we are going to see significant rain coming up as well over the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. The GFS says here's 96L, and it is moving northwest and then hitting a wall by the time it gets just east of the Bahamas on Monday evening, and then weakening some as it moves away to the north and east. We are watching this system in the Pacific as well, and you can see it has a chance to become a tropical storm, maybe even a low-end hurricane. See how it's drifting towards El Salvador. It eventually is going to stall and then weaken some as wind shear picks up, and then probably get kicked off to the west and not threaten land. The other area that we're watching in the Caribbean, the GFS does not really develop, so we may see that chance dwindling, but there are some lower pressures here around Jamaica. And then as we get later into the week, notice how we start seeing pressures lowering again over the western central Caribbean towards Thursday. And I will go back one model run because the GFS is still trickling in here. And you can see, generally speaking, that direction is east to west. So we have to watch things in Honduras, in Nicaragua, and maybe even Belize after about the 7th or 8th. So that's what we're going to keep an eye on here. The Canadian model also showing Tammy moving away, maybe trying to come back, also showing development with 96L into a low-end tropical storm or strong depression, surviving until about Tuesday night, and then weakening as it merges with a front northwest of Bermuda. We also see here on the Canadian, it is not as strong with what I think will be Pilar. It's actually farther east, all the way over close to Nicaragua, and then kind of just stalling near the coastline here. which is not good. That means there could be quite a bit of rainfall here in Central America, especially in the mountains. So we have to watch for flooding. But you can see the Canadian also is backing off on the idea of development here near Jamaica and Cuba. There will be rain, but there's probably not going to be an organized system. And then farther out, we're going to have to keep an eye on things moving through the Caribbean. And then finally, the European from earlier today showing 96L also trying to develop here, but not going to last much past Tuesday night. We also see here with the European, future Pilar is going to kind of bounce off the coast and not make landfall, and then get kicked off to the west as this front drops down. We don't see really a whole lot of development near Jamaica at this point. If it happens, it's going to be Monday, and it's probably fading after Tuesday. And then as we get later on into next weekend, pressures start dropping again in the Western Caribbean. So that's what I'll be watching for you guys. The other concern we have, not just whether or not these systems get named, but it's the amount of rain coming. And you can see some significant totals here over parts of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. We may see locally up to about a foot of rain somewhere in this area. Very heavy rain as well off the Central American coast. And look how it moves back towards Guatemala and El Salvador, over a foot of rain, which can cause significant flooding. And that could be a disaster in the making if this plays out. But look at how the Caribbean just continues to get saturated with heavy rain here on the European control, well above average amounts, especially around the Gulf of Honduras here over northeast Guatemala and just off of the Belize coast. So those of you who do plan to travel down here, be prepared for a wet pattern over the next couple of weeks. Taking a look at Invest 96L real quick. I should have put this in earlier, but you can see no ensemble member makes it particularly strong. It would be a weaker system, but you can see it may try to get close to the Bahamas before turning away. Bermuda's right over here, and I don't think we're going to see it really surviving by the time it gets here. And then here's 96E. And generally speaking, we have some looping going around near the coastline, but then a push back out to the west. These two are climatology. Typically speaking, something would come up this way, but we have such a strong front, I don't think we see anything affecting directly Mexico. And speaking of that front, Lord, here she comes, right on through the plains, the Rockies. We have winter storm warnings for the western and central mountains of Colorado. We've got winter weather advisories east of the Denver area onto the high plains. Winter weather advisories all the way up here towards Sioux Falls, all the way down to near Lubbock, Texas. And unfortunately, some flooding going on this morning as well in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, as we see some areas like Combine, Texas, that have potentially picked up to 15 inches of rain in just the last couple of days. Dallas proper, more like 4 inches, which is beneficial rain, but certainly can cause urban flooding. But when you get off to the south side of Dallas here around the South Loop, we're looking at around a foot of rain that has fallen here. And a lot of that has happened in the last day or so. We also have some pretty heavy amounts south of Glen Rose, amounts up to a foot as well. So parts of Texas underwater here today. And unfortunately, more rain is in the forecast here until this front clears the area. And if you look at the GFS, you can see what's going on here. We've got an intense push of very cold air, cross-polar flow coming down, and that is bringing much below average temperatures. We're looking at near record heat in the mid-Atlantic region here and near record chill coming down. And where the two meet, that's where things get very interesting here. Not so much for severe weather, but more for what it's going to do to your energy bill. People running the air are going to be turning on the heat. And so we go one extreme to the other. And then we see warming coming behind this into the west. So the northwest is very warm as this cold air drops south on Halloween into Wednesday. But here comes another wave of cold approaching eastern Canada here towards the end of next weekend. And that's going to drop down. And after any brief warm-up we do get in the plains and east, we are going to see a cooler pattern replacing it here by the 5th and 6th. And then high pressure builds in after that. So we're really going to be back and forth as we start the month of November. But this will be known for unsettled weather and certainly colder than average temperatures, I believe, for many parts of the central and eastern U.S. And you can see that on the GFS here. Here comes the cold, and it is not stopping for anybody here. It is going to slow a little bit south and east of the Appalachians on Monday night and Tuesday, but a chilly day on Tuesday for Halloween over the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, the Appalachians, and much of Texas. And we have not seen this kind of chill yet this season. It is going to continue to build south and east here. And then temperatures do recover some at the end of this upcoming week, but that will be short-lived. After a mild Saturday in the Northeast, again, we turn colder heading into Sunday. With that cold, we may have cold enough air aloft for some lake effect snows in this region. So that's what I'll be tracking in the upcoming week. You can kind of see two boundaries on the map here this morning, one moving through eastern Canada down into the Ohio Valley, and that it's stuck over Texas, which is why it's raining so much. You can see kind of a secondary boundary behind it, bringing in the Arctic chill down into Colorado and Nebraska, and that's where this area of light snow is breaking out here today into tonight. We also see some pinks and purples, which we don't like to see. That means icy conditions spreading south into western Oklahoma, southern Kansas, and even towards the southern Texas panhandle. And then this rain is going to push eastward. It's going to fade some, but we see southwesterly flow aloft and maybe low pressure forming near the coast. So Halloween night could be kind of damp here over the mid-Atlantic states, and we could have snow showers over the eastern Great Lakes into the West Virginia mountains, as well as snow showers east of Lake Ontario, across the north country of Vermont, and across a good chunk of eastern Canada. Those snow showers are going to fade by the second part of the week. It'll be chilly, but we see some warm up coming. Here comes our next system with more rain and some snow north of it across portions of Canada. And then we see another push coming with snow potential across areas of the Northeast away from the coast as we get to about the 6th and 7th. So this is just one model run. I expect it's going to change some, but we are going to see more activity here when it comes to winter weather getting farther south and east with time. Lots of rain is expected through the weekend over Arkansas, northeast Texas, all the way up the Ohio River. We could see amounts of 4 to 6 inches here. Also lots of rain over the Bahamas, still staying quite dry until Tuesday evening over the southeast, with the exception of far southern Florida, and the west stays dry as well. New England, we're going to see some rain here Sunday into Monday. We got part of this weekend in okay, but it's going to turn wet again. Generally speaking, about an inch or so of rain is expected. Significant winter weather in the Denver area. If we zoom in here, we can show you guys a little bit more, but we are going to see significant impacts here coming over the second half of this weekend, especially in the higher elevations. Eisenhower Tunnel over through the greater Denver area. Moderate risk for winter weather spreads farther north and east here, and even some chance of winter impacts all the way into western Iowa. And believe it or not, with potential freezing rain over the Ozarks and over parts of New Mexico, northwest Texas, and northwestern Oklahoma. And I'm sorry if I didn't list your community, but there are a lot of folks to talk about here. Here's a look at snow potential: 7-8 inches around Denver, 1 or 2 feet west of Denver, 3 to 6 inches over northeast Colorado, and a few inches all the way up into southeastern parts of South Dakota, northwestern Iowa, and central parts of Nebraska. That's the snow totals. Here's a look at freezing rain, which is another potential issue we've got to deal with. Our first icing event here, and it's probably not getting all the way into Oklahoma City, but certainly not far to your north and west. The significant icing could impact northwestern Texas, much of the panhandle here, and a lot of this is going to happen here tomorrow, really overnight tonight and first part of tomorrow, winding down here by early on Monday. Here's a look at temperatures as well. It's clearly coming down here, very warm in the south and east, very cold here in the Rockies with sub-zero temperatures expected, shooting straight down all the way into northeastern Mexico here early next week, and a very chilly start to next week for much of the central U.S., expanding into the eastern United States. And even South Florida, you're going to get colder here by Wednesday and Thursday. You'll have to break out the jackets. We could see frost and freeze conditions around the I-10 corridor, certainly across the Carolinas, and basically everybody except right along the immediate coastline here, Wednesday night, Thursday night, maybe even into Friday night as well. Here's a look at current temperatures, that freezing temperature line all the way down to just north and west of Wichita to Des Moines, certainly well below that across Wyoming. Here's a look at what we're expecting over the next few days on the GFS. That cold air gets drilled down, and take a look at this tomorrow afternoon around this time. 85 in the Delta region of Mississippi, 58 in Memphis, 36 in Oklahoma City. So a spread of 50 degrees Fahrenheit here in just a couple hundred miles. Still pretty warm tomorrow across the mid-Atlantic region, but it is cooling down as well across the Northeast. We are tumbling into the 50s in Boston, 40s in Albany, 30s in Burlington. And as we get into next week, that cold continues to intensify all the way down here. Take a look at Halloween night. We're looking at temperatures in the 20s and 30s for much of the Great Lakes, teens in the Dakotas, even 40s down into San Antonio, into Baton Rouge, 50s in central Georgia, and staying mild for another night down in South Florida before it starts turning colder for the second part of next week. Halloween temperatures from the GFS, if you are taking your kids or grandkids out to trick or treat, We're going to have some damp conditions in low to mid 40s around Virginia, central North Carolina, 30s in the mountains, low 30s and below freezing as we clear out across upstate New York, over parts of Ohio, over parts of Michigan, and certainly over Wisconsin as well. So I would love to talk about more, folks, but my time is limited. I know yours is as well. So as always, I really do appreciate your time. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video and you're relatively new to Josh's Severe Weather, please consider subscribing. That helps me continue to grow my reach and help more folks out. And I thank you all for your time today. I'm very appreciative of you. I believe I have joy in my heart. A lot of that comes from my faith as a Christian man, but that is knowing that I have the hope of what's coming in the future. As Jesus comes again, we have the chance to accept him as our Savior, be saved, and to live eternally. And for me, I was not somebody who grew up with faith. I was not somebody who was appreciative of people. In fact, I was one that always wanted to look towards the negative side of things, not the positive. What I've learned in my time here as a Christian man is that we have a lot of blessings that are given to us that many of us tend to overlook. So I wanted to read a quick passage. Paul tells the church of Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians 6:16-18, to rejoice evermore, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Jesus Christ, in Christ Jesus, that is, concerning you. Quench not the spirit, despise not prophesying, prove all things, hold fast that which is good, and abstain from all appearance of evil. Paul is telling folks to continue to go to God in prayer, to continue to show thanks, because God's created the earth here. He's given us all the spirit of hope through his son, Jesus Christ. A lot of folks maybe have not accepted Jesus as their savior. A lot of people have moved away from the church. There's been abuse in the church. There have been people who have sinned against each other. And I am happy to acknowledge that that is still going on today. But I'm also happy to know that there are still blessings out there that get overlooked. And I believe that I personally need to count my blessings. And I just want you to just, no matter what your belief system is, to just realize that you have it good, because there are people that certainly don't. You may be going through difficult times. I think a lot of us are. But I am one of those people that wants to encourage people and lift them up and let them see the good in life and not necessarily the evil that's out there. So I'm happy to pray for you no matter what your situation is. And I certainly am not going to judge you if you're not a believer, because I wasn't for the first 30 years of my life, but things did change. And I was fortunate and blessed to accept Jesus, to accept that God has created me, and to learn that I am a person that can bless other people, because I've been truly blessed. So I hope you all have a great afternoon and a great weekend. I'm going to be back on Monday morning, and enjoy it while you can. Winter is coming. Take care. See you then.